Good evening and welcome. I'm Elisa Doctoroff, and on behalf of Target ALS, I want to thank you for joining us for this very special premiere. Tonight is the first time we are sharing the full story of how Target ALS came to be, the vision that my husband Dan Doctoroff brought to life, and the innovators, scientists, and family members who have brought it forward. It's a deeply personal story, but it's also a story that belongs to all of us who believe that everyone with ALS should live. Over the last decade, Target ALS has worked with deliberate disruption, impatient optimism, and radical collaboration to transform the field of ALS research. It is now full of progress and full of hope. The film is about vision turned into action, about what happens when we break down barriers, when science, community, and compassion work together with relentless focus. We are so grateful that you're here tonight, whether you are longtime supporters, you're members of the ALS community, or you've just heard about Target ALS for the first time. We invite you to watch, but most importantly, we hope that you're inspired to join us in our mission. Together, we can change what it means to be diagnosed with ALS. Thank you, and let's get started.
I have no doubt that for certain segments of the ALS population, people are going to be able to live sometime within the next 5 years, much longer lives. And I think as we look out 10 years, we can foresee a day where everybody lives with ALS. And that's the ultimate goal.
ALS is one of the neurodegenerative disorders that I think has made the most progress. I believe that ALS is a solvable disease.
Target ALS's vision is that everyone lives.
With all of the advancements that we've seen and the momentum that's been building, this is very certainly achievable.
ALS is a disease of the motor neurons. So the motor neurons are special cells, very special, in your brain and in your spinal cord. The motor neurons send signals to the muscles to move. In ALS, those motor neurons die. When they die, the signals don't get sent. And so the muscles don't move. And you eventually get paralyzed. And you die because your respiratory system doesn't work. It's a nasty disease because it's just progressive. And every day, something may be happening.
The progress that has been made in the last 10 years in ALS is staggering. Now we have new modalities that allow us to target all kinds of different pathways. With a little girl who was on a ventilator who can now walk up a flight of stairs again with this treatment that's been more of an N of 1 treatment. So I think it's an incredibly exciting time.
Target ALS, led by Dan, and the culture that he has developed over the past 15 years, really inspired the community to do something about treating these disorders.
Target ALS has contributed in enormous ways, both from bringing together researchers to share ideas, to fostering collaboration, to paying for the research, enabling this research to happen that would not have happened otherwise.
It's really changed the way science is done in industry as well as in academia.
Everything that Target ALS has wrought is a testament to Dan's vision.
Target ALS has 3 values that we abide by. There is impatient optimism, radical collaboration, and deliberate disruption. When it comes to deliberate disruption, our approach from the very beginning has been to first identify the key barriers that are in the way and then systematically go about disrupting them.
When we say impatient optimism, for me, the impatient means also realistic. We cannot just hope that there will be a magic wand that overnight will solve all the problems of ALS patients. The community needs to keep on chipping away at the coalface, block by block.
Radical collaboration is part of the DNA of our organization. From the very beginning, we required that scientists leverage their complementary expertise, come together to work on the same research idea, share the data and tools within that collaboration. This has not only become an accepted way of doing ALS research, but has become the preferred way of doing ALS research.
Target ALS was looking for transnational collaboration with different labs and also with companies. And this is really something special for Target ALS. Almost no other foundation is doing it in that way.
Ready to take the challenge? 3, 2, 1!
Dan understands people, and it may be a subject that he has to address, or he doesn't know the details, might not even know the language, doesn't know the customs, whatever. But he can talk to the people that are working with it. And I watched him when he was leading our bid for the Olympics. He understood what had to be done. He knew how he could take the city, and given the constraints that you have, Dan knew how to pull those things together. And he had a presence that people liked and would follow, and he had an enthusiasm that said, this guy's gonna get it done. I want to join his team. He had a knowledge of what could be done. Dan gets a vision and he fights for it.
If he's working on finance, or if he's working on New York City, or if he's working on ALS, those leadership sort of attributes, those elements of seeing the big picture, but connecting individually with individual people and rallying them to the big effort applies in the same way.
When Dan first asked me and Zach Hall to think of how we would structure Target ALS, we wanted honesty and transparency. We wanted efficiency without too many roadblocks. And we wanted a clear message on bringing together those who are creating a lot of the science, the academics, with the companies who are the ones making the drugs.
Dan started Target ALS after his father died, and then subsequently his uncle was diagnosed with and died from ALS. What became very clear was that since the disease was actually identified 140, 50 years ago, there had been very little progress in treatments for people who had the disease, and that it was always fatal. The motivation to really push this forward came from that sort of deep sense of commitment to his family.
In September of 2021, my wife and I went to Iceland. We went kayaking, and I fell out of the kayak. That was not the thing. But in getting back into the kayak, I felt like I was suffocating. It was weird. I just thought, something related to my back surgery. So I went back to the doctor who had treated me before back surgery. And he knew of my family history. And he saw my muscles twitching. So he called in the head of neurology at Hospital for Special Surgery. And just looking at me, he proclaimed that I had like a 6 in 10 chance of having ALS. And I was like stunned. Although I don't actually have the hereditary gene that my father, uncle, and their first cousin did. And who knows, there's a second gene that hasn't been discovered yet. So it's intensely personal. But it's also, there are 1 in 400 people who are gonna die of this disease. And I wanna have an impact.
It's hard to go back there, to like before, and the recognition that life changed. It was hard to accept that life was going to be different. But you don't know what time you're going to be given. How long do I have, doctor? The average is 3 to 5 years. What is that 3 to 5 years going to look like? I guess you look back and you're grateful, and you look forward and you want more. I think the vision of Target ALS, that everyone lives, is intentionally hopeful.
Dan plays the hand that he was dealt. It never slowed him down. It never stopped him. He kept going on. He had long-range plans.
The first 10 years of Target ALS existence has indicated that there is a time, not too far from now, but probably not in time for Dan, where everyone can live with the disease, so that it's a chronic condition, not a fatal condition.
I'm gonna do everything I can until I die to solve this disease. When I was diagnosed, I quickly realized that there's only 2 things in life that matter. Relationships, starting with your family and friends. And the other thing is having a purpose. And I'm so lucky that I feel like I have both. My purpose in life is everyone will live with ALS, and I'm gonna hang on as long as I can.
Our approach has 6 mutually reinforcing strategies. The first is that they insist on collaboration. The second is access to tools and resources. Third, engagement of pharma biotech industry. Fourth, all our funding decisions are made by what we call an independent review committee. Fifth, we take no ownership of the data and intellectual property generated based on use of our funding. And lastly, we have become a hub of networking and communication for the worldwide research community.
Everything Target ALS does is aimed at having more clinical trials and better clinical trials. And in the particular case of ALS, there is now an FDA-approved biomarker to let you know, even before you've seen the symptoms of the patient, whether the drug is working. We're just delighted that some of the very best companies in the field have taken the step forward and are testing some of these hypotheses.
We built a lot of tools and did a lot of work that played a big part in leading to our molecule that's currently in clinical trials, DNL343. So it was really a pretty direct impact that our work through Target ALS had on our drug development portfolio and bringing drugs to patients.
Work that Target ALS has supported that has led to the stage of being in clinical trials is incredibly exciting to see this work that went from basic research ideas to drug development programs to actually treating patients.
Our understanding of the fundamental mechanisms of disease has really changed and improved and led us to more effective treatment strategies. And now we're starting to see the first treatments really have an impact.
We will solve this disease with new technology, new researchers playing in the field, and by partnering with other neurodegenerative diseases and companies who are interested, and we're going to solve it. There's no doubt in my mind that this is a tract disease.
There's a lot of hope and excitement around possible treatments and possible treatment avenues in ALS. Target ALS has played a large part in this. Now, it's inconceivable to do it any other way.
One of the reasons I am optimistic about the potential for Target ALS and Everyone Lives is because of Dan. He started from scratch and looked at problems and found solutions and has been determined. There is a way. He just has this gift of analyzing and finding solutions to intractable problems. And that gives me tremendous optimism about the future of Target ALS and the potential to really find a way for everyone to live with ALS.
Ultimately, everyone will live with this disease. It's not going to happen tomorrow, but we're seeing for the first time symptoms reverse themselves. We can solve this disease, and we will.
What an inspiring story of a bold vision and the will to transform it into reality. I'm Stephanie Ishu from Target ALS, and I want to thank you for joining us tonight. Now we have the chance to dive deeper with a few of the great minds you just met during the film. Dan Doctoroff, founder of Target ALS and chair of its board of directors, Dr. Manish Resangani, the organization's CEO, and Dr. Hamali Fatnani, a brilliant scientist at Columbia University and the New York Genome Center. I'm going to pose some questions to the panel about how Target ALS has changed the game for ALS research, but also topics that transcend this field, the values and grit that drive big, incredible missions like this one forward. As the center of this story, Dan, let's start with you. The film shows how personal this mission is for you. Looking back, what gave you the conviction to step into ALS research when so many saw it as intractable?
I've never been someone who thought of anything as impossible. When I was first confronted with ALS, I wanted to understand why progress had been so slow. I asked two brilliant people I trusted, Chris Henderson and Zach Hall, to help me take a hard look at the field. They did a deep survey and came back with 6 fundamental barriers that were holding ALS research back. To me, the answer was simple. If we knew the problems, then our job was to solve them. And that's what we did. We built Target ALS around those solutions, creating resources, tearing down silos, and giving scientists what they needed to actually move the science forward. That conviction came not from believing I could do it alone, but from believing we could change the system if we attacked the right problems head on.
Thanks, Dan. Those problems, or barriers as we like to say, were talked about in the film, and they may not be so clear to people who are unfamiliar with this field. Manish, you've been at Target ALS since the beginning. From your perspective, what were the most critical barriers Target ALS had to disrupt, and how did you approach them?
So Dan already referenced these 6 barriers that we identified at the beginning, and in some ways they continue to endure, and one has to keep working on them. So these 6 barriers really were, the first was that there was a real gap in funding for translational research. So there was a lot of funding for understanding fundamental biology of the disease, but not as much to translate that towards drug discovery programs. And so we focused our funding on those types of projects. The second was that scientists were working in silos. So there was minimal collaboration between academics, but even less so between academia and pharma biotech. So we incentivized, and in some cases insisted also, that the scientists had to work together on the same project and share their tools and data with each other. And this created a more collaborative environment in the field. The third was that there was a real lack of access to scientific resources worldwide. And this was a barrier to advancing ideas from scientists who especially were from outside the ALS research community or were emerging in the ALS research community and for pharma biotech. So we created access to these resources in a way that scientists were not beholden to anyone in being able to advance their ideas. So we call it the no strings attached access to these tools and resources. The fourth was that the pharma biotech industry had a limited engagement in ALS research. And so we, from the very beginning, had a keen focus to engage this constituency because they really know how to make drugs. And so we made sure that they had access to our funding, to the tools and resources we provide access to. They were represented on our board, our review committee, and we hired from the industry as well. And this has led to a granular engagement of this constituency over time. Mm-hmm. The fifth was that we wanted to create a system that attracted the best ideas on ALS research from around the world. So to do this, instead of using peer review system, which is used by other foundations to make funding decisions, we established what we call an independent review committee. And members on this committee can critically neither apply for nor receive our funding. So we remove that conflict of interest. And this has allowed us to create a credible system that anyone anywhere in the world knows that their ideas will get a fair evaluation from Target ALS. And this process is completely firewalled from any influences from the Target ALS team or any board member. And lastly, we made sure that our principle from the very beginning is that any use of our funding or any of these tools and resources we provide access to will allow the scientists full rights to any data and intellectual property they generate, because our goal is to remove barriers in the way and not create wrinkles in moving the science forward.
Thanks, Manish. All of these strategies aim to put speed in the system, as you said, but the real proof is seeing those strategies in action. Humali, as a scientist who has been supported by Target ALS, can you share a moment where the organization's support directly accelerated your work?
Well, I have 3 specific examples that I would like to highlight. The first is even before Target ALS became a behemoth in the field and proved to be so transformative. It's not just their money that does the talking, it's in how they conduct themselves, the vision that they have, and the spirit with which they approach everything. And this is a testament to Dan's leadership. So Dan has been inspiring me since before he knew I existed. Because I first heard of Target ALS, I met Manish before there was a Target ALS. And I was still a postdoctoral researcher, and now I've had my lab for 10 years. When Manish and I first met, they had just established this postmortem core resource, and they were actively fundraising.
I had just started at the New York Genome Center, and we had established the NYGC ALS Consortium. So and one of his visits to my office at NYGC, we thought, wouldn't it be great if there was synergy between the two efforts? And while we were actively doing the fundraising to enable the build out of these core resources, could we leverage some of these synergies and use some of the sequencing dollars that the ALS Consortium had to generate data from the PM core tissues? And because of Target ALS's no strings attached policy, just that one small action proved to be transformative for the field. Because what started small ended up becoming the largest such data resource anywhere in the world for ALS. And it has just snowballed from there. So that was the spirit with which they approached things, right? What can we do today with accept where we are, but use our vision to engage in whatever small acts are possible to drive that vision forward. The second was a testament to the risk-taking and entrepreneurial spirit that embodies Target ALS and how disruptive they want to be in the field. Right? And Manish talked about this independent review committee and the chance they take on new ideas and attracting talent from outside of the field. Well, as a young lab head just starting out with a crazy idea for a scientific project, Target ALS was the only funding organization that was willing to back this. So they funded this crazy idea where we did spatially resolved gene expression mapping from ALS tissue. And for that, we were using an emerging technology that had just been developed in a lab in Sweden and collaborated with a mathematician at Jim Simon's Flatiron Institute and New York University. Neither of these two people had worked in ALS before. So what we did was use Joachim's disruptive gene expression profiling technology and Rich Bonneau's brilliant mathematical mind and applied these two things to data generated using this technology. And Target ALS bet on the fact that we would be able to deliver something based on just this idea, on something that had not been proven before. Let me tell you, this project that started 10 years ago is still the largest such data resource of its type in the world. And it has spawned multiple such collaboration and its application now to multiple postmortem samples from the Target ALS PM core. There is no such resource like it for any disease anywhere in the world. And that technology that Joachim developed has now, on the back of this study, amongst others, been launched into the world-leading standard for this type of technology. So it has been sold. So Joachim was able to turn that into a company that was bought by 10x Genomics, and the product is now sold as Visium. So Target ALS has enabled much, much more than just a disruptive ecosystem. They basically helped to launch my scientific career because they were willing to take a chance.
Thanks, Somali. Isn't it great when theory works in practice? But Target ALS wasn't just built on ideas, it was built on real-world experience, specifically learnings from Dan's incredible career. Dan, you've led in finance, in city government, and now in science. What guiding principles have carried across all of those fields?
The main one is collaboration. I've always believed that the biggest, hardest challenges can't be solved by one person or one organization alone. In finance, success came from building partnerships and bringing different perspectives to the table. In city government, we achieved bold projects like Hudson Yards and Highline Park by aligning stakeholders who often started from very different positions. And in science, especially with ALS, collaboration is absolutely essential. No single lab, company, or researcher can solve this disease in isolation. From the very beginning of Target ALS, I built the model around radical collaboration and broke down silos, creating shared resources and encouraging people to work together in ways the field had never seen before. That commitment to collaboration has been the through line of my career, and it's what gives me confidence that we can do the impossible.
Radical collaboration is one of Target ALS's values that's mentioned in the film, alongside deliberate disruption and impatient optimism. Manish, how do these values shape your day-to-day decision-making as the CEO?
So the impatient optimism is a value that affects every facet of what we do every day. And the key there is that we approach what we do with a sense of relentlessness, because this is a disease which has no effective treatments right now, which means we have to be constantly moving forward and trying to push boundaries in every area of our work. And so Dan talked about how collaboration is a key value that he has always looked at. And when we think about radical collaboration, we think about not only incentivizing and building a framework where scientists can collaborate with each other, but we as an organization looking at opportunities to collaborate with other organizations. And so we have not only collaborated with what would intuitively make sense, which is other ALS-focused organizations, but also with organizations that work on related neurodegenerative disorders, but also with companies like DNA Stack that helped us build the Target ALS data engine, which Himali referred to, which is housing these large comprehensive data sets that we are creating for the research community worldwide. And it also speaks to a sense of being thoughtful while trying to disrupt the silos that exist. So all these data sets that are being created, all these biosamples that we collect, these were not accessible to scientists before. So we are very deliberately going out, creating these access points for scientists. And this is about creating access points for scientists worldwide who typically would not be able to otherwise participate in our ecosystem.
Thanks, Manish. I want to stay on this point about collaboration because it's so central to how Target ALS operates. The film talks about collaboration becoming the preferred way of doing ALS research. Himali, as an active researcher, how have you experienced that cultural shift in the lab?
Well, I already talked about how Target ALS's support enabled me to work on this collaborative project that my partners and I had dreamed up. But more than anything, Dan's way of approaching things gave me the confidence that sticking to my guns and being collaborative and deliberately disruptive with that collaboration was the way to go. Because traditional academic values, they judge you on the merits of what you as a lone researcher have done. They, in an effort to assess and promote you, they in fact, one would say, downplay the value of collaboration, right? They'll talk about team science and working collaboratively with people, but they're going to count the number of papers you have with just your name at the end, right? Things in academia are just weighted differently, and they don't really know how to measure the value of collaboration. Right? So when it comes to promotions and things, that's what they're going to see. But because of my involvement with Target ALS and seeing the courage of their convictions, it helped me to stick to my guns and say, this is the most satisfying, this is the right way to do things. This is what's in the long run going to make the most difference. So if I'm at an institution that just measures my individual contribution, that's on them. And what Dan taught me, what Manish taught me, is that it's okay to do what you think is right because it's the right thing to do.
Thanks, Himali. Together, we can move faster towards that ultimate vision of a world where everyone lives. And while we're emboldened by the progress Target ALS is galvanizing, the path to everyone lives isn't always an easy one. Dan, how do you personally stay grounded in that vision, especially in difficult moments?
I live every day knowing that I will die of this disease as I'm 4 years into my diagnosis. That reality could easily feel overwhelming, but what grounds me is hope. At Target ALS, we're seeing enormous breakthroughs with how the science is done, with tools being available to researchers, and with treatments that are starting to show real promise. I know this won't happen overnight. It will take a decade or more before we reach the point where everyone with ALS can live. But I believe it's possible. And that belief isn't abstract. It's rooted in the progress we're making every single day. Holding on to that vision keeps me focused, even in the hardest moments.
Thank you for sharing that. We do have to face the reality that ALS is a devastating disease, and we're not in the business of science for the sake of science. It's not abstract. We're in the business of science for the sake of effective treatments. Manish, to this point, we've heard about the importance of industry engagement. Can you explain why bringing pharma and biotech to the table has been a game changer?
Yes. So, as you know, the greatest discoveries are more often than not made by academia. And so they're really academic scientists and clinicians are really good at finding new things, making new discoveries, making new inventions. But when it comes to translating these into something actionable or even evaluating what is a good idea that is worth pursuing, and equally important, what is an idea that should not be pursued, because then the field is putting resources behind it. And that is where the pharma biotech industry's expertise becomes a critical filter and an accelerator in the key cases where they should be moving forward. And so it was really important to bring these two constituencies together. And what that has done over time is it has built those bridges, those relationships, and then collaborations. It has also built a trust in the ALS research community that it is okay to share one's findings with the broader community, as they do at our Target ALS annual meeting. And that has been, I think, one of the proudest achievements of Target ALS is that cultural shift, that this has become a research community that used to resist collaboration to where collaboration is the preferred way of doing the work, and even more so, collaborations between academia and industry, to the point that now other foundations who are working in different fields or foundations that are being newly formed, they come to us to figure out how are we able to make this happen, that academics and industry can work so closely together and share information with each other without feeling hesitance that their ideas will be scooped in any way.
You're describing a very different approach than the status quo, where everyone keeps their research close to their chest, which that's not an easy environment to overcome. Humali, from your vantage point as a researcher, what excites you most about how Target ALS supports research and approaches it differently?
Well, it comes back to collaboration and deliberate disruption, and being pragmatic and practical about it, and never losing sight of what the end goal is, which is to have everyone live with ALS, right? And so starting out for me, I wasn't really exposed to partnerships with industry until I interacted with Target ALS. And then seeing the effects of those partnerships over time, seeing the cultural shift that it engendered in the field, seeing how having industry and pharma biotech as a filter on ideas changed how scientists themselves thought about the practical utility of their work. It filters itself down to not just the types of questions you choose to focus on, but how you approach them, how you formulate the questions so that you devise answers that can have practical utility. And it's not just about how you prioritize what you do, but it's the approach with which you come to what you do, right? It's the process itself. So the value of operational efficiencies, of building in synergies, of even my lab is structured this way now. Teaching people how to work in teams. So every project that we have in the lab is a collaboration within the lab and across institutions. So they learn from the ground up what it means to be a member of a team, to rely on strengths other than your own, how to build these synergies, and still maintain your own independence as a researcher. It's, as Dan said right at the top, right? You cannot do this on your own. It is not possible. And the sooner people learn this, the better it is for not just our field, but all of them.
Yeah, what resonates with me is this impatience with the pace of progress that Target ALS was born out of. How can we make this move faster, be more effective, be more efficient? Dan, looking beyond ALS, what lessons about leadership and urgency can other fields take from this model?
12 years ago, we set out to build a different kind of model because the pace of ALS research simply wasn't acceptable. The idea was simple but radical. Foster true collaboration, provide the tools and resources that individual labs couldn't build on their own, and bring pharma and biotech into the process early instead of waiting until the very end. We've stuck to that framework consistently for over a decade, and it's working. Target ALS is now the largest nonprofit dedicated solely to ALS research in the world. I think the broader lesson is that when you face an urgent, seemingly intractable problem, you need both impatience and discipline. Impatience to refuse the status quo, and discipline to keep driving the model you know can work. That combination, plus a commitment to collaboration, is what makes real change possible, not just in ALS, but in any field.
Staying in this vein of looking beyond ALS, Manish, how do you see the Target ALS model influencing the way other disease areas tackle their toughest challenges?
I think Dan spoke to this a little bit already. And when I mentioned the barriers that we had identified, these are not unique to the ALS research space. One could say that they are unique to maybe rare diseases like ALS, but even that is not true. In fact, I would go as far as to say that these barriers are actually even more calcified in more mature fields, disease areas. So they need even more of a focus on trying to break down these barriers, because if one looks at just one of the most fundamental principles we have, that all our funding decisions are made by an independent review committee. And most of these people are not from the ALS research field by design. And the idea is that one is looking at and evaluating the science with a fresh pair of eyes from outside in. If one keeps having the ideas evaluated by the people who are working in the field, that does eventually lead to a level of groupthink. And then it does not allow for new ideas to be brought in, to be evaluated in a way that they will get a fair chance. Like Himali mentioned, that they had come up with a radical technology and an approach to analyzing the tissue. But if it was the status quo, that may not allow this kind of project to get off the ground. So it's really important that the framework is the kind that we created, where new ideas, new technologies can get a fair and credible evaluation, but also anyone anywhere in the world who has an idea can at least move their idea forward. So this whole concept that we use is of democratization of ideation for ALS research. So no one has to be beholden to any one lab or institution to access a critical research tool to test their hypothesis. And all of these come together along with engagement of pharma biotech industry to act as the key filter for the ideas of what is truly translatable. This is really important in a disease-focused organization, that we're always thinking about the solution for the people who are facing the disease, not science for the sake of good science, but good science in the interest of finding solutions for the people facing the disease.
I'm going to ask each of you one more question to close this discussion. Dan, as someone whose story catalyzed this movement, what do you hope people feel and carry with them after watching this film?
I want people to leave this film with a real sense of hope. For too long, ALS has been seen as untreatable, and that perception created despair. But today, the science is proving otherwise. We are reversing genetic mutations, and we're making real progress on sporadic ALS, the form that affects the vast majority of people with ALS. These aren't abstract ideas, they are breakthroughs happening right now. If viewers carry away anything, I hope it's the conviction that this fight is winnable, and that by standing with Target ALS, they can help create a future where everyone lives with ALS.
Thanks, Dan. It's exciting to hear about the breakthroughs we're seeing in ALS research. Manish, for those in the audience who aren't scientists, what's one piece of progress from the past decade you'd point to as evidence that the vision of Everyone Lives is real and possible?
I think the most obvious example to give is the real-world success of tofersen, the drug that is acting and working for people with ALS who have this one specific form of mutation in the SOD1 gene. I think before this drug, the concept of treating ALS or slowing ALS, much less reversing its course, was not imaginable. One dreamt about it, but never thought it would be possible in some ways. And the fact that in real world data is showing that it can indeed reverse the symptoms of this disease, I think that has just been a morale booster for everyone in this space. And what that really shows us is that if we can find the right target, which in biology means a gene or a protein or a molecular pathway that we can modify, we can actually reverse the course of this disease. And that is what we are solely focused on at Target ALS. In fact, our name Target ALS, the target refers to as we think of a target in biology. And so that is what we are focused on. If we support the best ideas and we can push them forward, accelerate them, we have firm belief and we have a conviction that we can get to a point where we can find treatments for all forms of ALS so that everyone lives.
Thank you, Manish. This example with tofersen shows us that the time is now. Real impact is being made today. Hamali, as a scientist in the field, can you close us out by sharing what gives you confidence that we're closer than ever to changing ALS from a fatal condition to a chronic, livable disease?
There's not much I can add to what Dan and Manish have already said. I echo their emphasis on the new gene therapies that are coming to market and showing the proof of concept that if you have the right target, everyone can live with ALS.
Thank you. And thank you all for joining me for this conversation. It's always an honor to hear from three trailblazers like yourselves. And to you at home, thank you for tuning in. I hope you would take something meaningful away from this conversation. I know I will. With bold vision, the right people in your corner, and the willpower to see it through, you too can make the impossible happen. Good night.